Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome to another episode of Nightlight. Tonight is the start of our 6-year collaboration. So, looking forward to, 5 years has been fantastic, and looking forward to next year. We have a fascinating show for this anniversary show. I'd like to do a preface for tonight's show. After the July congressional hearings on UFOs, I was flipping through the channels, and the 5 was doing a recap of the testimonies, and Harold Ford was on there, kind of expressing some skepticism, maybe showing some disinterest about UFOs. And he was clearly expressing his opinion, but as we will be discussing tonight, were his responses more of a reflection of the stigma within the black community not to discuss UFOs? So, tonight's show is going to be touching on topics like that. Might get into a little bit of the last month's congressional hearings, and to do that, we have RODERICK MARTIN from the Ancient Aliens and the Why the Big Secret podcast, and he is spearheading the Black Project. We have Ramona Scott, my partner in crime for a few projects and intergalactically renowned as a podcaster as well. Samuel Chong is the spokesman for Michelle DeMarquet's The Theuba Prophecy, and Samuel is the author of 33 1/3, and this is Samuel's second appearance with us. And Michael Carter is returning again this week and making about his 10th appearance on Nightlight. He is the author of 3 terrific UFO books: Alien Scriptures, A New World If You Can Take It, and Initiation. So I want to thank everyone for joining this panel tonight. And I should probably start off with Roderick and have him explain the concept behind the Black Project. What is it, and what are your goals?
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, for having me here, and Ramona, and and the rest of the crew. It's a pleasure, really being here on your show and being able to kind of share the initiative of Project Black. And it all just begins real quickly that, I've been doing this for quite some time. I was on Clubhouse app. I was one of the creative first winner. And with Clubhouse was an audio app, and you're allowed to, create what we call audio shows, and people would come up into the room and talk their experiences. So over 400 different interviews that I've done several years ago, and really started to kind of make note of how many of those were coming from the African-American community. Thus, at that time, being on, Ancient Aliens, Discovery Channel, history, then, of course, Gaia a few times, and all within the expression of talking about the extraterrestrial experiences within the indigenous and African-American community, you still get a lot of limited stories. And so I decided to write a book, Mark and Ramona, and I decided to write a book. And when I started trying to collect information on this book, this history of what it comes down to our community, then I was just blown away. I couldn't find no data. I couldn't find information. I couldn't find stories. And don't get me wrong. I can tell people all day long that I'm looking for experiences in the Black community, and the number one story pops up. Well, you got Betty and Barney Hill. Okay, so that's not the total representation of those stories outside of other experiences. I know Michael and all of the rest, different people have had them. But I was just trying to ask the question on a more of a corporate scale, right, or commercial books and TV shows, documentaries. And that's where it became that they just wasn't there. And so when I started thinking about that, I looked into history, and I found a reason, and I'll share it real quickly and turn it back over to you, was that when you start thinking about history, MUFON is an organization I work with. I'm a certified UFO investigator for them, but MUFON was formed in 1969. Then you had Peters National UFO Reporting Center, and that was about the only two. But if you go back into the 1920s, 1930s, 40s, 50s, when we had, racial segregation, systemic racism, all of these things, the only place that a person of color who probably would have reported UFO would have been the local sheriff department. Now, I can ask this question to your audience, to anyone. What person of color during that time would have went to the local sheriff department and said, hey, I saw a UFO, I'm not crazy, and then already know. And don't get me wrong, if you wasn't African-American, a person of color, they was treating you crazy about a UFO encounter. So imagine that side of the level. So that was a deer in the headlights that, hey, wait a minute, you got a whole history of area that those stories are not reported. They're disproportionately represented. And when you have a situation like that, when you are trying to get the facts, what are we truly missing in stories and other encounters that could have connected the dots when we have a whole segment of population that, number one, that wouldn't have talked about it because there were just so many social implications. And when you get into today, then it's just not going to happen because there's other things to deal with. So there, hence Project Black, which stands for an acronym of the Black League of Alien Contact Knowledge. And this is for everyone. This is for everyone to share in the journey, to begin to help us focus as a collective on an area that is disproportionately reported, and therefore we may begin the process finding other stories, whether they're in the military, whether they worked for some contractor, whether they worked for the government, whether they were an individual who was abducted. So imagine the thousands of stories that we now can collect and then also add it to the data of the other thousands of stories we may just get a bigger truth of what we're seeking, and that's where I stand for. And again, thank you for having me here. Thank you for everyone else being here. Back to you.
Okay. Michael and Roderick, do you think Ancient Aliens has made it more acceptable for people to come forward, to talk about their stories, report it to all the MUFON state chapters? Do you feel that your multiple appearances have brought about change since just start off with like Barney Hill's early 60s experience?
You want to handle that, Mike, or
yeah?
You want to go first?
Yeah, let me go first. Mark, it's a good question. I don't know if okay, my appearances on Ancient Aliens, which has been on and off since about 2014, 2015, I think has obviously made me more visible, but a lot of the comments I got were from people of color who watched the show, who would say, it's about time they had a little flavor on there, or, boy, there's a man of color, there's a black man on the show, and he's a minister. I think that opened some doors. Ancient Aliens, at least in my experience, in and of itself, is not about experiences. It's about the ancient astronaut theory. But, television being the medium that it is, it's given me more exposure. Therefore, other people of color have seen me and have said, wow, this is a good thing. Let me tell you about some stories I've had. And even if they didn't have any stories, it was just something new. So I give them credit for that. They have made the subject less taboo, well, especially now since our government is talking about it. And they've been on for so long that, people don't snicker anymore. And part of that is because of Ancient Aliens.
Right. Okay. And Roderick, did you want to follow up?
Yeah. So I'll piggyback on what Michael said, and of course, again, he's been featured on Ancient Alien, lots of time. I just had been there once, and then, of course, about 5 or 6, 7 other shows. Not only contrast to that Ancient Alien has been around 17 years, and they've had multiple episodes, and like you said, they kind of take people on this journey of never answering the question. But what really doesn't happen, and for me, I think, is that I can't tell you the population of African Americans that watches Ancient Aliens, right? That Ancient Aliens could be an effect on. Now, there are some of us that do. I'm not saying that they don't. But when you get down to a ground level, and then, like Michael said, they don't focus on the experiences. They focus more on what's happening in the sky. I think that we should focus on what's happening people on the ground. And once we started going in that direction, this is when the breakout happens. And like I said, it's not that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we don't hear these stories because there's racist people. No, it's just that there's things that were in place that wouldn't probably have given a voice to African Americans who probably have been receiving experiences and different things. So therefore, it's a void. It's a huge void. So if you think about documentaries, go in there. Go find, and I challenge your audience to make comments to this if they can. tell me 5 stories. Give me more, and then let's exclude Betty and Barney Hill that you've heard from these different perspectives. Although, like I said before, we were on the same. You got to know when you hear the Navy story with David Fravor and the boats and airplanes, there had to be, African and black people on the same ship that was in the military. When, Robert Salas talks about the Malmstrom Air Force Base when they came and turned off the nuclear weapons, there was African Americans in that army on that base at the same time. And what I'm saying is a different perspective of different connectivity could mean a lot more information for us. And so I wouldn't give Ancient Aliens to say that they have opened up the Pandora's box. Now, by them having Michael and myself on and Billy Carson, giving them a little more diversity of people to talk to. But I don't think they have delved into to say, okay, we're going to go down into this mystery of a population that, we don't have no stories from. And what if we did? What if there was some other type of context? What if there was some things that someone got some downloads that answer some more star constellations? Or what if there was just, what if is the biggest challenge of this?
All right. And, okay, let me bring Samuel and Ramona, and maybe start with Ramona. Ramona, when you talk to people and or doing your conferences, get-togethers, are you finding that people are, your friends might be whispering a little bit more frequently about it, or are they becoming just more vocal about what they may have witnessed or experienced?
Well, I've been trying to see if there has been a difference, but it's still a little quiet. And as I was sitting here and listening, I thought, maybe part of the reason they don't, now they will speak freely of otherworldly experiences, rather than put the label of UFO on it. And I think that is their way of coping, because they're more open about, seeing spirits or something in the woods or whatever like that than they would to say, I think I saw a UFO or flying saucer. I saw something. They'd rather have something that's more, I don't know what the word would be.
Tangible?
Like, yes, because, everybody talks about ghosts and this and that, but we don't, as a community, talk about visitation from someone from outer space. And I think partly is because of their religious upbringing, and in the church, most brought up in the church in some form or fashion. And so they tend to label these experiences as seeing something that is more on the sinister, evil side, if that makes sense to you. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
I think, I know Roderick and I talk about this. There's a couple of things. The first thing is this, at least from my experience. And this is for white brothers and sisters as well, but I know for these shows, if you're on the show, it's really imperative that you've written something. I've been doing this for 25 years, and it's just like people take you more seriously if you've written something. Okay, that's number one. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that is something that you have to deal with. I have a friend now who's working on a book, a white brother who's a politician in the Midwest, and he's been doing a couple of shows here and there before the writer's strike. But he even knows that if I've written something, people will work with me. I'm taken more seriously. Second, and this is to Ramona's point, and I'm sure Brother Roderick will chime in. Sometimes we, as African American people, in my experience, and it's many of us, we're not a monolith. We all don't think alike, nor should we. But a lot of stuff is just taboo. If you can explain, I have a sister, extremely evangelical, loves the Lord. I'm using her language, but she cannot get with me on this because it's about demons.
Mm-hmm.
It's about it reminds me from that line from Shakespeare. It doesn't matter how much evidence you give her. She says, well, Satan can appear as an angel of light.
Right.
It's like there's nothing you can say. It reminds me of a quote from Shakespeare. Hamlet says, "The spirit I've seen, maybe the devil, and the devil have power to assume a pleasing shape." And so we've kind of put ourselves in this box. Or if you do talk about it, it's like, well, that's what white folks talk about. What are you talking about? It's like it's like your blackness is somehow challenged because you've kind of gone over into this kind of taboo zone. But I think a lot of it is religiously based. That if I don't understand it, and white brothers and sisters have this too. Don't get me wrong. I'm here in the South. I'm in the Bible Belt. I'm in Billy Graham country. And so it goes there, but you still have some offsetting things where there's a great part of the population of the dominant culture who is open to it. This is the success of these shows like Ancient Aliens. But for African Americans, it's a stigma. And who wants to go up against that? Who wants to challenge all of that? Centuries of church history and what have you.
Exactly.
And I think that keeps us.
Hey, Michael, can I jump in? Michael,
yes.
Hi. Can I jump in? Just I can offer you only my perspective of this, and you're right. With the radio show that I do, you have to have written something, but of course, the author's ethnicity is not on the books. But I have people on the show that have written something, and usually because if you've written something, you have something to talk about and can fill 2 hours. So I think you're absolutely right, though. I have turned a blind eye to individuals because I don't know what kind of information they have to share. And if you've written a book, then you at least have the book you can talk about. And that is probably a very unfair way to look at it, but it's the only way I'm sure I can fill 2 hours. But you have a very strong point here. And it is, somebody has to have written a book in order for me to have them on the show so that I can talk about what they have experienced. And there are, more on one side than the other side. But you're absolutely true. It's true. I don't think color comes into it, but it does. And it's a shame because it shouldn't. So that's my 3 cents.
And not only that, but it's not something has a whole, let's see, because I'm almost 70, all right?
Uh-huh.
And I was very much interested in esoterical things, so I read a lot of non-mainstream books more so than the mainstream. And so I was aware of certain things, and I stepped outside of the box. And then you look at another section of people that don't do that. And so it's like with anything, if they experience something, they can only identify it with something that they know of. And back in the 60s and 70s, I mean, you know, sci-fi was starting to become big, and that brought a more universal awareness of things. In the Black community, there is more of a spiritual type thing going on, where even back through before slavery and in the continent, as well as Native Americans, working with spirits and things like that was common among the people before the influx of Christianity. So you would come across more stories and more people who are willing to tell you about weird beings. Like, take, for instance, my mom, who's raised by a Pentecostal preacher. Now, my mom, what I know now is that as she was growing up, she could see into the other dimension. And she didn't know that. I didn't know that when she would tell us, you know, the stories. But she could see the people that no one else could see. And they were like giants. Now, they could have been aliens, for all we know. And so she never was very vocal about it. But, you know, in the church, in the community, you know, people were aware of things like that, especially around Louisiana, because a lot of weird stuff was happening down there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that they could put a name on it. And then with my experience, even with my knowledge of all the UFO sightings throughout the millennia, it was hard for me to believe, but I knew that that's what it was, but it still freaked me out that I didn't want to tell anybody.
Okay.
Until, go ahead. I mean, it's just that it's a stigma that you don't, because it's hard for you to wrap around, you know. It's almost like reading the book of Ezekiel. How many people, you know, will focus on Ezekiel in the Bible? And that's basically about an encounter.
Mm-hmm.
They go right past it because it's just too much.
Yeah. It really is a pretty weird chapter that you really aren't expecting to encounter.
I think also, though, too, you know, it's eyes wide shut. I mean, it's right there if you look at it, but we're already taught that if you challenge that narrative, especially from a religious point of view, then somebody needs to pray for you, or there's something wrong with you. I mean, if you look at now. We went to, Roderick brought up Barney. Okay, I remember the TV show V. Now they did a remake of it, and Brother Chestnut, Morris Chestnut, played this reptilian who is a man of color. It was interesting. It was never explained. He, you know, he's an extraterrestrial. He's a reptilian, but he decides to take on the body of a black man. But that was never talked about. You know what I mean? The rest of the cast was predominantly white, but they were white actors who were playing reptilians. Then you go to Brother from Another Planet, Joe Morton, okay, who comes here. He crash lands. He's from Another Planet, he lands in Harlem. John Sayles did the movie. It did okay at the box office. It's kind of like a cult classic. Now we look at Brother Chiwetel Ejiofor, who just finished doing, was a wonderful job, The Man Who Fell to Earth. He did not play the David Bowie character. Bill Nye did. And he is the protagonist. Chiwetel is the protagonist. The three main principal stars of the show were people of color, and then Bill Nye. But those are three I can name off the top of my head. But that's only three. And okay, right. So for the first time, you see people of color playing extraterrestrials. This is 2023.
Yeah.
And when you're on social media or when you look, now it's changing. I got to give it that. But when you look at these shows, when you look at the people who are doing these conferences, it is predominantly white male. Okay. And it's just, we don't have, I'm not going to say it's done intentionally, but we talk about raising consciousness and changing consciousness. Now, I am seeing more women, white women, but I am seeing some sisters in there or women of color. But even today, if you go on Facebook, if you look at these, there's a conference here, there's a conference here, it's predominantly white male. And so, as Roderick was saying, because intentionally or not is really not the issue. But when are we going to be willing to listen to someone else's story? Native American folks have been talking about climate change and the earth changes that are coming since they've been on the planet. Al Gore, I love Al Gore, but people were talking about this way before Al Gore. And so this is what I'm saying. It's just part of the American consciousness. And what we're saying is, and what Roderick is doing, and Barbara said it, this is a very important show because we're trying to say that other people's stories need to be included. I just watched the 761st African American Tank Battalion liberated, fought with Patton, under Patton, liberated some concentration camps. You didn't see them in Private Ryan. Right. You didn't see them. Morgan Freeman produced this, and he said, this is part of American history. Why do I have to fill in the gaps?
Yes. This is why I think Roderick's Black Project is so important, is to really to bring out the voices of the minorities here in the U.S. and also in the world in this field. Because, I'm Chinese, I'm Samuel Chong, I'm Chinese. And, in China, where I come from, a lot of people just portray that the UFO disclosures to have been made by people of the white males. And there hasn't been any kind of like African American figure in China that's really prominent in this field at all. But on the other hand, the book Field of Prophecy is a bestseller in China, and according to the book, the blacks and the yellows, the blacks and the yellows came to Earth first, way before the Caucasians, way before the ancestors of the Polynesians, and way before the Jewish people. And so I think this is why we really need to work together, and this is why I'm so interested in becoming involved in the Black Project, in bringing out information to the people in China and Taiwan, so that they can be more aware of the people from different perspectives. And also, because of the popularity of the book Field of Prophecy, I think this is a very good opportunity to bring out voices of people of color to people in Asia. And I think it's also important to realize that all men, all humankind created equal. So when God created every one of us, it inserted a tiny portion of itself to each one of us. It doesn't really matter if they're black or Asian or yellow or Caucasian or white or kind of green color or blue color person. It really doesn't matter. You're all created by this one creator. And we are all part of God, and God is part of us as well. So we need to work together and bring harmony to this world. And I think, especially given the fact that in the past, in ancient civilizations, the blacks and the yellows collaborated and created a very harmonious world. And I think we can also do that in the modern times as well, to raise people's consciousness and also to create a more kind of knowledge, more harmonious world, and to make an example for the rest of the world. And if you really look at the people in Africa and also people in Latin America, they seem to be living a more spiritual life than the modern industrial world like Europe and North, like in the United States. I think it also goes back to the meaning of life is to live a more spiritual life and not to be so focused and brought down the materialistic aspects of life, because we cannot take away the material wealth when we die, but what we can take away is the spiritual lessons that we learn in each of our lifetimes. So I think it's important for us to all work together, and I really appreciate Roderick's initiative in what he's doing for the Black Project.
Yeah, and Samuel, when Michael was talking a few minutes ago, he's giving the examples of some may see ETs as shape-shifting demons, and Ramona brought up regional folklore around in Louisiana, maybe New Orleans comes to mind. You've recently traveled to Japan and also been researching the concept that Jesus was buried in Japan. So what do some of the Japanese colleagues say about their experiences? Are they, or Japanese or Asian cultures, more open to discussing the UFO phenomenon?
Yes, the Japanese colleagues are really open to discussing the UFO phenomena. And in the book The Uber Prophecy, it talks about there's a tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan. And when I did some research on that aspect, I find that the people in the village have unique customs that are very different from the nearby villages. But the concept of Jesus and Christ is really very different for the people who are unfamiliar with the book, because according to the book, Jesus was indeed born out of Virgin Mary, and he was born from the embryo implanted by the ETs, the Theobans, who really wanted to fulfill the prophecy and to let the people know that something extraordinary was going to be born that way. Because he was born out of an embryo, he had to pass, his astral body had to pass through what the ancient Nagas call the river of oblivion, forgetting all the knowledge to perform miracles. So that young Jesus, even though he was highly spiritual and knowledgeable, having a very in-depth conversation with the people of the temple, he couldn't perform miracles. He traveled to India. So this is why some people say Jesus went to India and traveled to China and died in Japan. So there's a tomb of Jesus in Japan. But Christ, on the other hand, is another figure, another being, and whose purpose is to show people that there is there's life after death by having himself to be crucified on the cross and resurrected 3 days after. And he was able to perform miracles because he remembered everything, and he was kind of like an E.T. who took on the body made by the humans to be like the appearance of Jesus, so that he was able to perform miracles so that his teachings could be believed by the people at that time. Because people in the past, especially the people in ancient times, are just like us. If you cannot perform miracles, your teachings, your kind of doctrines are not going to be believed by the people because you're just a regular person. So they had to send someone special, a Christ-like figure, to perform miracles for people to believe in. So this is the Japanese people are very open to this concept, and the Chinese people are also open to this concept as well because they really don't have a lot of preconceived notions about the Bible because not a lot of people get the opportunity to read the Bible in China because of the government censorship. So I think this is a new concept on spirituality that fills the vacuum in mainland China because people have been yearning and longing for spiritual knowledge and spiritual information. And this book fills the vacuum. So I think if any of the books can get into China, I think you'll be very popular because people are looking for such books.
Yeah. Let's bring Roderick back in since we've everyone just presented some fascinating information. And Roderick, when you were at the party at Bill's house for the Consciousness Award, and you're doing your shows. You have a lot of people opening up to you. What is it about you? And we can probably say the same about Michael. Is all everyone on the panel, really has a way about them that lets people express, these unique stories. But Roderick, what is it about the way you present your information that people want to call into Why the Big Secret and discuss their story with you?
And that's a great question. And I think that what I try to do, for starters, is to provide people with enough information that they can read, things that they can see, hear, to awaken the possibility or the curiosity to the possibility that we're not alone in the universe. I start there. I also start with the, energy or consciousness or the frequency to let people know that, unlike most people who are not going to go on the journey with you with your story, I use the terminology I believe you believe, and so if someone's sharing their information, and they ask me, Roderick, do you believe me? And I'm going to tell them, I believe you believe what has happened to you, and therefore that's enough for me to go on a journey with you. That's all. But I try to employ what I call infotainment, because this subject is so serious all the time, and people are just they just freak out about it in some cases. So I bring in infotainment. I like to give them the information, but also a little humor. We can talk about it. We can laugh about it. We can laugh about what happened to you, because and then once we get them to understand it's not just you, then we do that. But I try to, first give people just the first simple implications of what we're talking about, especially when it comes down to the biblical side that Samuel and Michael eloquently talked about, and that is, hey, go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 or whatever, and the scripture says, let's make man in our image. Because people always say, well, what do the aliens look like? That's, well, what if we look like them? But everyone knows your kid can go to school and write a sentence and says, our family had dinner tonight. That means plural. That means that there was more than one person sitting at the table. And when Genesis says, let's make man in our image, in the likenesses of ourselves, that's somebody's talking. A group of folks are saying this, or 2, 3, 4. So that I tell them that, but I don't try to go in hard to say, okay, this is the, whatever. You just think about it, ponder on it, and then hopefully that opens the curiosity. Now, another part of this that Michael was saying that, we got fact and fictions, right? We have, a lot of these TV shows and TV movies, this is scripted. They're writing this stuff up. And it's helping us to get curious about things. But on the flip side of, like you said, where's these true stories? Where, the people that are coming forward that have real encounters. And so I tried to give a little history lesson. I tell people that, and some people may say, what does it matter? Go, okay, if you heard of the Red Tails story of the fighter group in World War II and how heroic they were. And most people in the African American community can resonate with that story, the Tuskegee Airmen. They're like, yeah. And then I flip them and say, okay, well, one of those guys stayed on, and he stayed in the Air Force for 35 years. This is one of the original guys who painted his tail red. His name is Colonel Friend. He's passed away now. He died, I think, 96 years old. But this guy, in 1958 and 1963, he's African American, ran the U.S. Air Force Project Blue Book, right? This is one of the most infamous stories, the bedrock stories that we've heard. There's been books, television shows. There have been hundreds of articles, Professor Hynek, this and that. Well, you wouldn't hear one echo of this man and his heroic, from the Red Tails on to one of the biggest programs of all time is Project Blue Book. Your audience can Google it right now, Alfred Colonel Friend. And why was that, right? Why was that? Well, maybe in the time that this went down, we're talking about a time in 1958. There weren't no colonels that want to attach themselves of power to the UFO phenomenon. Are you crazy? I'm not ruining my career. So if we're going to ruin somebody's career, let's give it to this minority guy. And then, okay, I can say that was it. But then right after him was Quintanilla. He's Hispanic. You ain't heard that, right? We just hear the other stories. And I think it's important because once we can make those dots and connect that we have had some implications or the past connected, more people may feel comfortable to begin to say, okay, maybe we can do this. And then we can go back to the slavery days. And I'm still investigating this. But, all the books, Michael will tell you, when we think about the ancient civilization, they call UFOs or UAPs chariots because they didn't have a name for them. They didn't name them UFOs. But go back to our folklore of slave songs, one in particular, swing low, sweet chariot, come to take me home. Why were they singing that? I look over to Jordan, what did I see? Angels coming for me. Well, we know UFOs were flying over water. And when they said chariot, swing low, they had to have been out in those fields looking up saying, swing low, sweet cherry, get us out of this mess, right? So I'm still investigating those stories, but once again, we there's history, there's other things, and then I can even go further. But so real quickly, and I'll pass it back, is so I take what Michael says, you know, where we're trying to go here. I listened to Samuel, and he's correct with people being open for it. And it's not a racial color thing. This is information search. We're trying to get more stories. What if we done had half of the stories or a quarter of those stories not being told, and within there is layered some truth that we can connect dots that everybody's still looking for. And the same audience is going to want to hear them. It's got no color to it. We're talking about extraterrestrials. We're talking about contact. We're talking about spiritual. So if you then take it back to, like he said, in our land this plane, or I'm going to call it a UFO, I'm going to land a UFO here, is that it is a spiritual thing. It's a taboo subject in our community. It has to, and people can't go with this thing. It's just too much, and it's too much emotional because people don't want to be ridiculed. You know, I know people that'll tell you or tell their spouses where the dead bodies are buried before they tell them about their UFO encounter. That's how powerful this thing is. And so I just want to create a place to start the conversation, get people comfortable where other people are sharing, and then ultimately, because I truly believe that our young folks today are religiously and emotionally bankrupt, and they're lost, they're wandering, they think they're crazy, and they think that they're having these dreams and these connections, and nobody will believe them, but they're not crazy. And I want to make sure they know that a lot of people are having those experiences at night and being contacted. You can talk about it. You're not crazy.
Exactly. Exactly.
And okay, I have one question, and maybe Ramona could follow up with my statement. But Roderick was just talking about UFOs might be taboo in the community, but UFO documentation did start in Egypt, and have it in many of the other Mediterranean and Middle Eastern countries.
And caveman drawings.
Oh, it shows up there too. But I just wanted to work in where the documentation, Moses following the pillar of fire at night through the Sinai Peninsula, throughout the Middle East for 40 years. A lot of this stuff was cited and documented in and around Africa. How do we bring it back to it? It's taboo to talk about it now, but African communities were the first, were one of the first to document it. But it's also been documented around the world since deep antiquity, like Ramona said, with the Lascaux cave paintings from 30,000 years ago. Michael, is that something for you to answer? I'm not.
Well, here's
or Roderick.
Well, that's a lot of a lot of questions. That's a lot of questions.
The African, I think the African culture and these other cultures go back. You forget that this United States is the newest thing on the block, and so these other cultures, Africa, China, Japan, South America, all of these are old, ancient civilizations, and this was commonplace. I mean, you can tell by all the antiquities that we see in the structures, et cetera, et cetera. This was commonplace. This was not unusual, and then you have to read. So how do you get more people interested in this? Because it is a natural phenomenon, I believe, because it's not anything new. It's new to this civilization, but it's not new to the ancient civilizations, and they've proven that. So I think that the more books that are written, the more discussions that are held can bring out and make people feel more comfortable, because they're experiencing it here. They are. They just don't know what to call it, because, when you think of aliens, you think of little green men. So if they're not seeing a little green man, they don't know. But I do want to say to the listeners out there is that if you have time periods where they're lost to you, if you have something that comes into your room and visits you or pulls you up, you're not crazy. There are others that are experiencing that also. There's no such thing as crazy like that. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to. I mean, absolutely. Absolutely with you, Ramona. I was thinking about. Listen, Egypt is mentioned almost 700 times in the Bible, in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, 25 times. So you see right there the influence in that part of the world. There's back then there was no such thing as the Middle East. That's a pretty modern concept. You still have Egyptians. You still have Egyptians who won't acknowledge that Egypt is part of Africa, which I find troubling, but it is. Egypt is part of Africa. But geopolitically, a lot of their ambassadors, a lot of their envoys, there's Egypt, and then there's the rest of the continent. The point I'm trying to make by that, and that may be the continents were probably closer back then. I mean, if the land masses were probably closer. But trying to get back to your original query was this. And I think this is unconscious in the psyche of our nation. But we are a nation, collectively speaking, that are just getting it that people of color are human beings, that there's a humanity there. And so, when I hear people say some of these extraterrestrials look just like us, I wonder, when you say us, are you talking just about blonde, blue-eyed people? Are you talking about just the dominant culture? Because it's very different. It may be unconscious, but are you saying? And I had a healing from a blonde, blue-eyed brother who was an extraterrestrial. I thought he was Palladian. My point being, and I'm thinking they look at race the way we do, just like back in biblical times and beyond. They didn't look at race the way we look at it now, especially here in the United States. But when I hear white brothers and sisters who are contactees or maybe not, or have read literature, and they say, well, I heard, they look just like us, I'm not always sure they include me in that because of the depictions that I see.
Yeah, but, there's
just
so many different races.
Well, it's also that thing that if you're blonde, blue-eyed, the Palladians are beautiful and sweet, and they are the good ones. And then there's the grays, and there's reptilians, and they're the bad ones. And it's just so unconscious that that's not always true. If you look at the literature, if you look at some of the things that may have been going on in Nazi Germany, a lot of these blonde, blue-eyed Palladians were not the benevolent ones. So it's just in our psyche as Americans that we're just split along those racial lines. But when someone says, and I'll shut up, Ramona, well, they look just like us, I'm not sure they're talking about they look like me this lifetime.
Well, I just had a thought. What if, like a lot of other mystical things, that they appear before you with something that you're comfortable with? Maybe they have that wisdom enough to not try to frighten you so much, or maybe they can tell what you can handle. And so they appear to you in your mind's eye a certain way with something that you're familiar with. Because I just, I look back on the one that came to me, and I searched the internet, through all these drawings, because that's all we have are drawings of someone who's seen something, and I couldn't find it. So maybe that's why they look, they look just like us. There's
literature that says, that people have said, well, that's what screen memory is all about. But when they came to me, I wish they would have come to me with something I could have handled, because they scared the what out of me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like I'm trying to give people an out, but I'm just saying that in America, we are such a racialized society, especially in the dominant culture, that, I've shown pictures of extraterrestrials who were brown, just people's renditions. I just put something on Facebook a few weeks ago, talking about this new movie coming out called Anunnaki. And they were all brown. And some of my white friends were like, oh, well, that looks kind of interesting. And if you called them on it, they would have probably gotten defensive. But if they were blonde, blue-eyed, there wouldn't have been that hesitation. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying that, this is the world this is the culture that we live in. And all this plays a part in how we perceive, how we look at reality. And there's still that aesthetic that blonde, blue-eyed is beauty. And that's the aesthetic. Hitler perverted it, and he wasn't even blonde, blue-eyed.
But most of
that's all I'm saying.
Don't see that, though. They don't see that. They have
people of color. People of color see it. People of color see it.
Yeah, and also too, two pilots that was in that hearing. One of the pilots, and I read another article, a disclosure article, that this particular spaceship I guess if that's what you want to call it, was piloted by black-skinned beings.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
You know, so it's that the more that people come out with these descriptions, then the bigger the field gets.
I agree, Ramona, and that's why what Roderick is doing is so important, because we need to hear other stories.
Yes.
Well,
we need to hear other narratives.
Well, Robert Temple has, that Serious Mystery book, and that is presenting astronomical scientific achievements of the Dogon tribe from
I have a book right here.
Approaching about 1,000 years ago. Maybe not. That might be a little too far back, but that tribe. Where are they? Are they from northwestern Africa? Is that?
Yes.
The general location.
Yes.
Well, they were.
I'm looking for the book. It's in my library while you talk. Go on.
Yeah,
Mark,
but they were far more advanced in astronomy than by the time Galileo even showed up.
Exactly. And people say, well, where are they getting this knowledge? So I mean, I think we've, we just need to be comfortable hearing other people's stories. I see it in the world of religion. And the attitude is, well, Christianity's the real religion. The other ones we kind of tolerate, wink, wink. But we know it's about it, and that's just not true. It's that all of these perspectives bring something to the table, and that we're all richer for it. And so diversity doesn't have to mean divisiveness, and it doesn't mean that you give up your uniqueness, because we're all unique. But I think that we're on the brink of something here. It's, human evolution is slow. I couldn't wait to look at the man who fell to earth. The three leads were people of color. Of course, Chiwetel Ejiofor is, just one of the most talented actors that we have. He, Denzel, and so male African Americans, or he is African, he's Nigerian. But to see him play this extraterrestrial, you see, and be the lead. When was the last time you saw that? Hopefully we'll see more of it.
Okay,
Michael. Go ahead.
Okay, Michael, since you're just bringing up like Christianity is kind of like how most people are seeing UFOs through that religion. It's kind of like a paraphrase, but I wanted to bring Samuel in to see what some of the Japanese might be able to get into some of the Pacific Island folklore of. We've covered that on a show when we had Merle Fankhauser as a guest. With some of his songs about based on Hawaiians talking about silver shells flying out of the ocean. Yes, Samuel, how has some of the Asian Pacific Rim face shaped how that they view this phenomenon?
I mean, for the people in the Pacific Islands, like I was in Easter Island a few years ago, and the yes, the most interesting question I asked about them was, who do you think that built the statues on Easter Island, the Moas? And a lot of them said they were there before they arrived on the island, so they have a lot of history and that they don't know about. So they had a legend saying that there were kind of 7 masters that were the original kind of emperors or masters of the island, and or like the saints, 7 saints on the island, and that kind of coincides with the story in the book Field by Prophecy that talks about the history of the ancient civilization Lemuria, which was a very successful continent in which people lived very civilized and spiritual manner, in which money did not exist. So people just took whatever they wanted or they needed from the market, paying them back or having anything in exchange. So no one took advantage of each other, and they lived a very sophisticated life in which they were able to use advanced technologies like anti-gravitational technologies and also supersonic laboratory systems to build the Moas, the statues on Easter Island. So they have a very interesting and very successful civilization, which unfortunately disappeared about 14,500 years ago when the entire continent sunk into the ocean. And Easter Island and Hawaii Islands are part of the remnants of the continent. And if you look at the people on the Pacific Islands, they had a lot of traditions that kind of like the interesting dances that are really unique. And they lived a very spiritual life until the Western civilization and the materialistic way of living invaded their ways of life. Similarly, the people in Africa and the people in Latin America got into the same way. The traditional tribes in Africa and Latin America still are living in a very spiritual life form, and they're able to have a lot of very interesting spiritual psychic powers. Like I just read the news that some of the tribes in Latin America in the Amazon region, Amazon rainforest, they still communicate with each other through telepathy. And it's also very interesting that a lot of the phenomena such as ghosts that people see, some people can see ghosts, can be explained in the book The Over Prophecy. And also a lot of the ancient knowledge have been passed on to the people in Latin America, in Africa, and also in the Pacific Islands, like the ways using herbs, using herbal medicine to treat different diseases. And I think right now people are seeing UFOs or UAPs. It's nothing new to them, and they just they think that they saw that in the past in the structures, in the archaeology, some of the archaeological sites. You can still see the drawings of spacemen and with flying saucers. So I don't think it's something new to them, and I think they can connect that very, very easily to their traditional cultures.
Okay. How about Buddhism or some of the traditional faiths of Japan?
Well, the Japanese people, they believe in a unique form of Buddhism. And the people in Taiwan, they believe in the Buddhism from India, and the people in China they say they believe in Buddhism, but they worship money, so they don't really believe in the Buddhism that had been passed to Taiwan or Japan. So people just pray for good money, so it's not really Buddhism. So I think, but more and more the younger generations are starting to wake up. So they are able to see that all religions all come to one, which is how to live a more spiritual life. But in Buddhism, it teaches people how to live in a very spiritual life by not worrying about money, by not worrying about all the complicated relationships and the politics and things like that. And also, and people start to realize that if you really look at the Bible, it's the teaching of the Christ that people should follow, not like the organized religion, what we call the Christianity, or certainly not the Catholic religion, the Pope, that we should follow. It's the teachings of Christ that we should follow. How to love one another, how to love ourselves, and how to pray to God, and how to be connected to God, and the source of the creation. And people are starting to see that we should live more harmoniously and to really take care of our environment, and also to realize what's really going on behind the scenes. Who really create the wars? Who really create the religious conflicts? And who really creates the racial segregation or conflicts? Is it really the people? No, it's not the people. I love my Black brothers and Caucasian brothers and white brothers, but who really are dividing the nation, dividing the different races? Like, I've been doing a lot of research on this aspect. It's the concept of conquer and divide that's really doing the things that we have been seeing so far in the last few years. It's not the people, it's not the mass, it's the power, it's a small group of people who's trying to benefit and profit themselves by creating such conflicts. If people have the knowledge to know what's really going on behind everything, then we can do something together. And all the people in the world, regardless of the race, regardless of the skin color, we can unite and really work together and to really bring the consciousness of the people to a level in which we can have a strike. Remember that the rich people, the wealthy, the small group of people, they rely on us to profit themselves. If we stop working for them, if we have a strike using nonviolent resistance, such as just like what Dr. Martin Luther King preached or suggested, nonviolent resistance, we can rise up against tyranny and to really bring everything together, so that they have to listen to our demands, so we can create a better world, a more harmonious world in which all the people work together and harmoniously without any issues that we have been seeing today.
Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I agree with you, Samuel, and let's bring in Roderick. How have your experiences shaped your approach to helping others?
Now, are you meaning from me seeing a UFO when I was 12 years old?
Yeah.
Well, my experience is, of course, just seeing a UFO for me is just something that I saw when I was 12 years old, and I'm like, okay. And then the dots start connecting. But when it comes down to taking that experience and to help people, because it was something I never talked about when I was a kid, and I just kept it, underneath it, but it was seared in my mind. But as the months and years rolled by, I didn't know how significant it would play a role into my search as an adult. But knowing how I looked at it or perceived it, in fact, growing up in a house, where my mom, we're just not going to talk about these things. And knowing that I wasn't the only one that was under the umbrella of Christianity, then it made me understand the fact that there was a lot of people that were dealing with these experiences, that they needed a more ground approach. And so that's where I kind of be here with Project Black, is because, there's a lot of spiritual side of this. There's a lot of high thoughts and things, but what if I can start with the basics of people who just don't even, there's millions of people that still think UFOs and aliens is a joke, but those same people are having sleep paralysis. Those same people are waking up with these little scars, right, having dreams. They're just having all of the symptoms that there's a possible abduction in their life or some type of contact. And Absolutely. Because of the way society is put together, they are not going to put two together and say, wait a minute, this is, now we're talking about off-worldly events, but instead they're going to go in silent, they're going to implode. And my personal sentiment, and that's just me, and I'm not saying it's not for everybody, but I do believe as we push for disclosure, as we want more and more people, we got the congressional hearings, we have all of these things. That's not filtering down to my community. I don't hear our radio stations local talking about, hey, did you see the congressional hearing, the whistleblowers? That's not filtering down. So when we think about the top layer of that, when you think about David Grush, and he says, not the fact that we got airplanes that concerns me or spacecraft. It's when he says we found some that was abandoned. What do you mean abandoned? That means somebody's walking among us. And so all of those things lead to us to say, okay, if something can walk among us and go undetected, it has to blend in. It has to look something like us. And like Michael says, it doesn't, there's a lot of storylines behind that. And, we're still, no matter what, going to get the blue-eyed alien and the blue-eyed Jesus, of course, right? We're going to get the story. Whoever's telling those stories are still shaping them. But everyday people in my community is not going to handle an extraterrestrial if he comes out tomorrow. Now, let me just say this. Dr. Douglas Edward Haynes, you all can look him up. Okay, he's a African-American brother. He's a scientist. He studied, he was actually built the first airline, or the first airlines in African-American. It was a small airline. He sold it. His father was into modern planes, but he's also played with, systems, and he built the first, he's into the electric car, not a flying car race right now, but he has a car concept it's a flying saucer. And it's like, okay, it's a flying car, but it's a flying saucer. And he contacted me, and he said, I've been watching you. I've been watching Project Black, and he watched a video that Samuel and I did on Forbidden Knowledge. And he says, I have all the patents, technology. I'm building a space transportation. It'll take me another 10 years, but he's worked with NASA. He worked with a lot of these bigger companies, or some of them have used his technology. And he says, I want to give Project Black access to all of my patents, all of my technology. And he says, as I'm building this space transport, he says, I want to give you this access so that you can build a craft to go look for the black planets. And for a moment, it was like a joke to me, like, what? And then once I thought about it, the conversation that Sammy and I had, and a lot of other people, that, okay, there's an origination from somewhere. And then I thought about everything starts with a dream. Then that joke for 5 minutes turned into a reality of like, wait a minute, all of this coming together, as we search and find out well, some of these people are being contacted. Who's contacting them? Are they seeing, star constellations like you mentioned with the Dogon tribe? All of this stuff, it seems strange, but it got to come together somewhere. And it got to start meaning that either messages have been sent and they've been ignored, cut off, changed, or we just go beyond where we are today in our minds and begin to know that there's some higher things at work. We know this, and let's go explore it together. So we're going to talk about all of that. And so when you got Ramona talking about her story, you got Samuel, coming from a whole different culture, but lining things up. And then, of course, Michael with all his experiences, and not experiences, but his experience at what we're talking about. And so it's just been a brilliant thing for a collection of people that are coming on board. And my main thing is we're going to start that conversation, and we're going to talk about all of this crazy stuff. And then one day somebody's going to walk out of there and say, I'm not crazy. It wasn't crazy stuff.
Exactly.
So that's where we're going to go.
Exactly. And also, too, to add to that, is that so far, even the information that we do have, it is kind of boxed in. But when you realize that these encounters and these experiences manifest in different ways, more people can relate to it and say, wait a minute, because everybody's thinking, oh, I have to be taken up and probed and everything. But what if it's not that? What if it's like being just simply transported to someplace else? What if it's like having a problem and then having the answer downloaded to you that you wouldn't ordinarily know, or either find the solution to, but bam, there it is. I mean, it's so imperative that we widen the scope, widen it, and get as many people talking about it. And the first thing that has to be done is the government has to quit lying to us, lying to the people. And I think once they stop lying and tell the truth, then it'll be like a floodgate opening up.
I mean, also we can start working to have a grassroots movement just to educate the mass of people and to have a revolutionary kind of movement so that the people can learn that the government is lying and intentionally deceiving us, and so that the people, the general public, will have the knowledge to distinguish the lies of the government and also the truth that we have been trying to bring out. And I think back to Roderick's point, I think it's very important that all the people on Earth that work together, utilizing the resources that we can put up together. For example, in terms of technologies, if we have certain technologies that can benefit the people on Earth, then we can utilize the manufacturing talent in Taiwan or China or even Japan just to produce certain devices that can really bring out the free energy devices so that people don't have to rely on the petroleum or gasoline. So I think there are lots of things that we can collaborate and cooperate together. It has to be international. It has to bring all the races of people together. And we are all brothers. We're all created by God. We should work together and to bring the messages out that people can have the knowledge and to join us and to participate in our movement. And hopefully we can do something together and to succeed in what we are going to be doing.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. I have everyone just presented some interesting phrases that maybe we can say we can link them together. But Roderick, used the term like trying to process all this crazy stuff. And Ramona said widen the scope, and Samuel was talking about a call for an educated citizenship, and all of that would be dependent on the appearance of a mentor that Michael writes about in Initiation. So, Michael, how do we get, other than the four people on tonight's panel, that's a start, but how do we get these mentors to get the word out from everyone that, hey, this UAP, UFO stuff is really happening, we need to deal with it, etc.?
Well, I'm going to be honest with you, brother. I don't know if that's even really possible. There are 8-9 billion people on the planet. So I will go back to what's doable, and I think it does start. When I met Roderick, I had talked to maybe a few other people of color who were talking about doing what Roderick has done. And that's the difference. And there's no disrespect to them, but talking about it and putting it together is something else. I look at some of the teachings of Jesus, and, when people are ready, they will do what they need to do. So I don't think that it's about how do we convert all these people. That's not the word you use, but I'm just saying you plant the seed and it will grow, and some seeds won't grow. I mean, I think he did a parable about this. I think we have to do what's doable. Otherwise, it's overwhelming. And you want to have realistic expectations. There are people, Mark, that if a ship landed in their backyard, they would still deny it. Mm-hmm. And so for me, it's just about just going where people are open. Those people that are open will come to you. Those people that are not won't. And I think that's doable. I think that this is the beginning. Roderick has already said about people coming out of the woodwork, people he didn't even expect. He put the intention out, the universe will feed on it. We're not going to get everybody. We may not get half of everybody, but the people we need to get, we will. And, we can be mentors, and we can also be mentored too. But that's how I would roll with this, because the government is not going to stop lying. That's not what governments do. Even now, with all that Brother Grush is talking about and what have you, we still have this stone wall going on. But you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We're already in disclosure. But if you're waiting for the government or for a president to come out and say, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow Americans, there's something else, that's a fool's errand. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. What may happen is, what's happening is what's really going on now. You've got some people who want disclosure in high places. You got some people who don't. And so we just have to face that fact. And luckily, there are people like Grush and Greer and other people who are working to make this happen. We have to be mentors, but we also have to be smart. It's the long game. The only way the government will stop lying, in my humble opinion, is if we do what Mandela and those folk did in South Africa. If we say there's going to be amnesty, if we have a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, and that there are people who were murdered, people who were in the wrong place at the wrong time, people who had lost their lives, driven to suicide, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we can say that's behind us now, like South Africa did, that we're going to start from here on in, but you've got to be transparent. Maybe then you'll have some folks who'll say, okay, I can come forward. But it just doesn't work that way. This is too deep. You got governments all over the world in cahoots trading technology who've been doing this since Eisenhower. So they're not going to just say, you know what, we just need to come clean. But what we can do is work smart. We can take care of our part of the garden, which is what we're doing right now. We're doing it right now. He's getting the calls, Brother Roderick. You were putting this out there. No one else has done this. Ramona's coming up, giving a historical perspective. Brother Chong is coming. This is how it starts. And there'll be maybe the other people who said they were going to do this will be working on it in their way. So I'm excited about what we're doing now, but I also want to keep it. I also want to keep it realistic. Like I said, there are 9 billion people on the planet. We're not going to get them all on the same page, ever.
Okay. I appreciate you, Michael.
Yeah, and Ramona, since you're, and you and Barbara are the two lone women on this panel, what are you seeing from a female perspective that guys might need to improve on? And it would be just any guy, not just anyone on tonight's panel, but what's a perspective that you would recommend to improve communications?
Well, that's a hard question. I think about that all the time. I feel that there's a need to revisit everything, and that could be impossible. But look at the Bible and the scriptures, the stories, all in all religions. Try to merge them. Try to look at them in a different perspective, because a lot of the truth, there is truth in all of it. There is some truth in all of it, and it's like a puzzle that needs to be put together. But you can't have a mindset. You need an open mind, a mind devoid, if that's at all possible, which I don't think it is, but devoid of preconceived notions. And therein will lie the answer. I read as much as possible, especially now, because I'm just feeling this pressure, and that there is about to be an unveiling. I really do believe that. I just don't know what is going to be unveiled. But the truth eventually will come out. And we just have to keep being open with people, keep putting it out there. And like I said, we have to get outside of the box and take a look at what we have classified as some other kind of experience, and maybe it falls into this whole realm, because I think it's all connected. I really do. I hope that makes sense.
No, I think it did. Yeah, Roderick, you wanted to say something?
No, I was just agreeing with her. I mean, it's we have to go back and begin searching for those truths, because obviously now the stories that we've gotten that have gotten us thus far, there begin to be holes in them, and it's growing. And it's nothing like what the Vatican, what did they do last year? They called in all of these religious leaders across the world so that they can get on one page or one accord to say, okay, if the extraterrestrials reveal themselves, then we're going to have to tell them that they support Jesus too. They have to keep the doctrine in place, but yet I think the younger people and ourselves, as we give them that curiosity approach, may begin to just search for the answers. And not that everything in the Bible is untrue. We just need to qualify a few things based upon what we do know now, right? And there's nothing wrong with going down that journey as we go through what we're doing here, and because it's going to take us in all of those areas. It's going to open up all of those stories, and it's going to take people in a place that they're not going to comprehend. It's going to make them go home and question the narrative to the person who taught them the things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a big deal. But don't let it yet just pop up on us in a extraterrestrial show up tomorrow and say, oh, by the way, here's the story. I know our community will be just flat out nuts.
Yep. Yep.
So at this point, now I'm also concerned about the future of the youth, because we're moving into what I call a space economy. All right, we got space tourism. We have all of these different things, and we got a faction of our population and our culture that will tell their youth today, it is nothing out there. Don't look up to the stars. God says everything is here, here, here. But that 20 years from now, that particular young kid is going to be working in space tourism. He's going to be getting on a spaceship thing that's going to take him to space faster than I can get from one end of Dallas to the next, within minutes. And then he's going to be looking out the window, and he's going to be sitting there, and he's going to see something fly by wave and don't look like us. And he's going to be freaked out, while there's going to be some other ones sitting there laughing like, oh, there he is, only because his parents, his surroundings, won't allow his mind to expand to the curiosity that there's more out there than what he's been taught. So that's going to be a problem, all right? We got like Michael said, everybody wants disclosure. Do we really want disclosure? I was on a plane to Miami last month, and it had a lot of turbulence. But could you imagine us getting off the plane, and they handed me a brochure and said, by the way, because you want disclosure, that it was a UAP that passed by. Oh, it cut off our instrument panels, but don't worry. The ninja skills of the pilots, we didn't crash. But is that disclosure you want? You know what I'm saying? Or do you want to look down and your neighbor's grass is growing, and you call the homeowners, and then they give you a report because you want disclosure that he's been abducted, and that's about the third one in your neighborhood, but we got to tell you? You know what I'm saying? Do you want that type of disclosure? So I don't know what we really want. But what I do know is we got to at least start those conversations.
And I'd like to say for those that don't want to look outside the explanations that have been preached to them using the scriptures, that I think it's in Corinthians, but there's something that says something like, for by him all things in heaven and on earth were created, things visible and invisible, whether they are kings, lords, rulers, or powers, etc., etc. The verses that they skip over, perhaps you should pay more attention to those and find out what is it trying to tell you? Because if it says visible and invisible, that is letting you know that there are things that are not as clear and black and white. So in order to have if you have an experience, if you want to understand the UFO interest, it does not mean that you're going against God, but that you're going deeper into God, unquote. So you're not hell-bound. You can still question, and there are other things. You just have to be ready to find it out. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and it shall be open.
Mm-hmm.
Ask and it shall be given. There's a lot in that.
Okay, Michael, what is there a role that regression could play in aiding this communication process?
Yes, I think it plays an important role. It certainly helped me, and this is what the late John Mack was about. Of course, there were people before John Mack, and Bud, the late Bud Hopkins. Yes, it can. A good regressionist, I think that is key. The person needs to be very skilled because you're dealing with the psychic. You're dealing with the mind. But a skilled regressionist, I think, can lead you on the way to healing, to help you accept what has happened to you, whether you consider it a positive experience or not. A good regressionist can help guide and navigate, because you still have to live. I could when we hang up in a few minutes, I could get a visit tonight. Good or not good, but I got to go to work tomorrow. I got to pick up my daughter tomorrow. Life goes on. Bills have to be paid. Relationships have to be sustained. But a good hypnotherapist is worth their weight in gold.
Okay, and possibly tied to a regression session. There's the generational visitations. If that is really happening, then there are a lot more minority people being being experiencers visited by ETs. Roderick or Samuel, or when you talk with people at conferences, are they discussing generational contact?
Yes, you really cannot imagine how many people in China are kind of in their subconscious mind interested in this topic. It's just that in their daily life they have to earn money, they have to work, and they have to deal with the so-called professionals, that they hide their true subconscious mind to the extent that they don't really explore this publicly, but privately, if you tell them that, I see that there's an explanation about ghosts, and they would be interested because a lot of Chinese people, they have seen ghosts before, and I think it's important to really to utilize and to bring our resources together and to help each other out, especially across different communities. For example, I can refer like a lot of Chinese podcasts to all of you, and so that you can have exposure in the Chinese communities, and also vice versa, and people in China and Japan can know more about the experiences of the African American communities, and also the people in Africa as well. So I think it goes both ways, that we need to unite and to work together and to collaborate, to bring our resources together. And I also agree with Michael, what he said, some seeds will grow and some will not. But we have to try. We have to try so hard in this lifetime so that when we pass on, when we reveal how we did in this lifetime, there will be no regret because we tried hard. And I think it's our life journey and life purpose is to wake people up and to bring the consciousness levels up to another level.
Okay. Makes sense. How about you, Roderick?
I think that in our community, we probably don't hear and probably never at this point a generational stories of this, because like I said, nobody talks about it. It's a taboo subject. But I know it exists, and I know that people can connect the dots, especially when it comes down to, bloodline or Rh negative blood, things to explore, So I agree with, not so much agree, but I understand what Samuel was talking about, but like I said, when it gets down toward here, that is another part of the search, There's a lot of people that's in a transition that were, in the early ages of World War II wars and, out on plantations or just whatever. And I need those stories. We need those stories before they go. We hope that this mission or initiative would get someone to go to their grandmother and ask the question, before time expires in this time. Hey, grandmother, did you ever see a cow? Yeah, or just whatever. Because we don't have that. There's nothing being passed down. There's nothing being told. There's nothing being archived. There's no, stories. Yeah, your daddy is an alien. We don't know. But yet those stories exist, and maybe I'm just saying it from a, elementary level. But yeah, I just want people to talk. I just want come on, just sit down and talk to me. So tonight I did a show right before we got here. I got a 24-hour hotline, for the audience. It's 888-345-9121. It's got a kind of a long greeting. I'll change it. But tonight I got 7 people that have left their stories, and I got 8, 10 in the last 6 days. And so, I'm running little ads and stuff. Tell me your experiences, and hopefully we get the big one. I got a whistleblower, I want to call it. This gentleman was he worked for a government contractor when he was 20 years old. He's 68 now, and he still cries about his experience because he still can't fathom what he saw. But he was in Antarctica, worked for a private contractor. He gave me their name. He gave me all of the, the company, the whole 9 yards, and he talked about what he saw and what they were doing and who they was working with. But yet today, like I said, so he's willing to come forward. There's another gentleman who was the first person of color that was on the Nimitz, that's ready to talk. So I'm gathering, but still not enough. And my goal is to one day have an event, get Michael Sloan in here and Ramona, all these people where we can get on stage, and then other people tell their stories, and now we can help them with what they cry about at night, because a lot of them still do. Hopefully I answered where you were going. But.
No, yeah, you did, Roderick. Then it was a powerful story. You know, we have like 4 to 5 minutes left. You know, maybe everyone could, you know, have plenty of time to plug upcoming shows, appearances, you know, whatever they're working on, and I mean, wrap up the evening. So where I'm glad Ramona could make it, even though she had a little problem with the horse at Toys R Us this morning, but you know, we could do that real quickly, and you know, we'll call it a night. And you know, I just want to thank everyone for such a fantastic show. So, you know, Roderick, do you want to start off with all the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, sure. If anyone is listening that want to share your story or your experience, and it don't matter if you're black or white, we're in this together. New stories is new stories, but you ought to believe that. You can go to whythebigsecret.com. There is a contact form, or it'll lead you to a contact form. If you want to volunteer, maybe you want to help us. And like I said, I don't have a mission of everything, but just know that you're in the arsenal. You can go to Why the Big Secret, hit the contact form, fill in your name, your telephone number, and I will call you. But in the meantime, you know, I have a book that's coming out in a couple of months that's going to really tell some stories about where we are. It's called The Unspeakable Truth. That'll be ready in a few months. I have a couple of documentaries that's going to come out. Got a couple of big TV projects that's in the making. And so all of this is leading us down this road. And so once again, the hotline, 888-345-9121. And so, Mark, I just want to thank you for allowing us to come together, all of us, as a collective on this platform tonight and really begin the process, because all it takes is one conversation at a time, and we just started at a time. And so I appreciate it. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, Why the Big Secret, on YouTube, Roderick Martin.
Okay. Roderick, I'm just really very fortunate that you and the rest of the panel were here tonight. Okay, Ramona, how about you? Have any conferences?
No, I'm working on a book. The book's title is By Any Other Name, and it is a book of my experiences throughout my life, and hopefully it will spark something in someone to let them know that they're not alone.
Okay. Samuel and Michael, we have about a minute left, so both of you can take 30 seconds, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Okay. I'm going to be back in Michigan in a couple weeks. I better take a jacket because it's already in the 40s at night there. It's at Lake Houghton, Michigan. It's the Michigan UFO Con. I'm working on a book of sermons that I hope to have out by Christmas, and I want to thank you and Barbara and all the guests for just making this a special night for me.
Okay. Samuel?
Yes, I'm still trying to promote the book, The About Prophecy, and helping people to raise their consciousness level. and to have knowledge and how to resolve and how to respond to the challenges in their lives. So any suggestions or opportunities, please let me know. And you can search my name on Google and find information about me.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, and I'm very appreciative. And we'll see everyone. Thanks Sunday for Barbara and Solaris. Talk to you later.
Yes.